What would outdoor living be without trees? We'll take a look at some great ones for your garden, as well as some good-looking garden furniture that fits beautifully under their canopies. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to today's show. Now, even though we're in the studio a little later, we're going to go outside and I want to show you how furnishings such as this chair fit into the garden beautifully. Now, what would a backyard oasis be without a lush green carpeted lawn? And of course, a canopy of trees. I'll give you a list of some of my favorites coming up. We'll also learn about some new trees I'm planting in my new garden. Now, these trees have been trained into some amazing shapes. You've got to see this. Now, a little later, we'll take a look at a delicious recipe. But first, I've got to go on just a little bit about these beautiful peppers. Even though it's late in the season, they're still showing out. Just take a look at this one. Look at that glossy fruit. This one's called marble, and for good reason. The fruit looks like a marble. And take a look at this one back here. I love it for its variegated foliage. And then you get a range of colors with the fruit itself. The youngest fruit, well, it's pale yellow, then it moves to orange, and then to bright red. Pretty festive, huh? And then take a look at this one. Now, I can't remember the name of it because, well, I picked it up at a nursery and it didn't have a tag, but I just couldn't resist because, again, look at the range of color with the fruit. Now, if you can keep the plants from freezing, that's the reason I like to keep them in containers, because you can bring them inside. These are great for holiday decorating, whether it's Halloween, Thanksgiving, or Christmas. And when we return, we'll go to a tree training camp in Tennessee, and I'll show you how I'm using some of these fantastic fruit trees in my own garden. That's right after this. Now, Tennessee might be the last place you'd expect to find one of the largest farms dedicated to the ancient art of training trees. But here it is, espaliered trees trained into different shapes and forms at River Road Farms in East Tennessee.
The espaliered tree is a wonderfully versatile tree and group of trees. You can create enclosures such as the garden wall that we have here that's made out of a Belgian fence. You can also train them over forms and create living arbors that you can walk through. You can extend those into tunnels. So if you want a 50-foot tunnel of living architecture, including the fruit that you can have and flowers all around you, you can take the horizontal cordons and you can use those to create fences around vegetable gardens, herb gardens, or other appropriate places in your landscape. Any tree can be trained into a form. We train in the classic European style, which includes the candelabra shape, the horizontal cordon, the fan, the arbors and tunnels, and Belgian fence. If you have another shape in mind, go to your location that you're going to train your tree in, and you need to tape out the shape, the height and the width. The next thing is you need to put a wire training system in place using 12-gauge wire that essentially outlines the pattern of your tree. Then, of course, the next thing is to train it. You cut the tree down to the lowest point of where your wire system is. And you then begin to allow the buds that are in that small trunk to begin to grow out and follow the pattern on the wall. You pick the plant, you decide what purpose that you want the tree to serve, and train it to that form. And you will end up with a spectacular end result. Living architecture in your garden. What in the world could be better than that?
The pear and apple espaliers that I'm using from Peter are in the shape of the classic cordon, which happens to be a gala apple, and the pear is in the shape of a candelabra. and I'm currently using them in two different ways. First, along this arch, you can see how I've used these kefir pears, and the second is in the vegetable garden, where I use the gala apples to define and create garden rooms. Now, you've no doubt heard me talk about garden rooms before. They're extensions of the home out into the garden, a great way to expand your living space. Coming up after the break, I'll give you some garden room pointers, such as creating a lush carpet under your feet and incorporating fabrics and furnishings. And then, to give you a little shade, I'll share with you some wonderful trees that I enjoy in my garden designs. There's more ahead, so stick around. Boy, these peppers are so beautiful. Hi, welcome back. You know, one of the things about the garden home concept that I like so much is that you can take your style inside and move it outside, or vice versa. Take, for instance, a beautiful wicker chair like this. What I like about it is you can use it either way, inside or out. And as you can see, I've put a beautiful fabric on these cushions that really make it pop. You know, these chairs are so comfortable, but I bet you've sat back in a cushion like this when it's been rained on and it's damp. It's no fun. But you know, some of these fabrics are really resistant to weather and to mold. Take, for instance, this pillow. What happens when you apply water like this? It just beads up and rolls right off the fabric. It's perfect for using both outdoors and indoors. I had some fun recently adding some fabrics and furnishings to the garden of a design client. These creamy chartreuse colored chairs with this umbrella fabric look great set against a lush lawn and the stone walls. You see, all of this creates an inviting space for the whole family to get together and play. Now, when you're creating outdoor living spaces, there's several things you want to consider. Now, I don't want to oversimplify it, but there were two overriding factors when considering this particular space. One was function. You see, the family wanted to have a lawn that they could enjoy playing on, and we used that lawn as inspiration for our color theme, another design element. So by using the lush green grass, we chose the color of the chairs and the fabrics from there, and it all came together. Now, when the garden was under construction, and that really hasn't been that long ago, we created a good soil base and made sure that the irrigation system was properly installed. That's so important to keep a great looking lawn. Now let me show you another outdoor living space on the same property, but this time it's around the pool. Wow, those girls are really having a lot of fun. Here we've used brown chairs and some cool blues in the way of fabric. It certainly sets the stage for summer. But in the fall, the nearby outdoor fireplace becomes a gathering place for the entire family. And it's warm and cozy with the reds and oranges in the fabrics and the strong wooden chairs. You know, taking some fabric samples into the garden center, samples of fabric or colors that you're using either inside your home as you look out into the garden or from the garden itself, is a good way to match other elements for those garden rooms, such as the plants you're going to use and maybe the containers they're growing in. When you create your garden room, think of the floor. Will it be grass, a chat path, flagstones, or decking? What will your walls be? A physical structure or an evergreen hedge? Or maybe the walls are simply implied by the placement of containers. Then add fabrics, furnishings, and accessories. Now, what about a roof for your garden room? Some people add awnings, pergolas, or other garden structures with actual roofs. But there's nothing wrong with just sitting under the canopy of a tree. Some of my favorite trees are coming up. And then a recipe that uses fresh from the garden ingredients. Hope you're hungry. Welcome back. Earlier in the show, we visited with Peter at his farm in Tennessee, where he's growing some amazing examples of espalier trees. Then we saw how fabrics and furnishings can inspire us when we start to choose plants and lay out our garden rooms. Now, before the break, I was talking about the roof of a garden and how it can be made of many different things, including the canopy of a tree. Now, there are certainly trees that you would want to consider as a canopy for a garden room and others avoid, like this one called the Osage orange. Now, it certainly produces an interesting fruit, and for this very reason, you wouldn't want to have it as a canopy because, well, when these fruits come down, if they hit you on the head, it would be very uncomfortable. The other thing about this plant is that the trees have really long thorns on them, so it's to be avoided. But it really is a beautiful thing. It's a Native American tree named after the Osage Indians. Now, you may be wondering, is this fruit edible? Well, it's actually not. The Indians used the wood of the tree for their bows and arrows. It has several different names. One is called the Osage orange, as I mentioned, bodark, short for bois d'arc or bow and arrow, as well as Maclura pomifera, which is its botanical name. Okay, so this tree may be more of a curiosity and less of something you want to use as a canopy, but there are lots to choose from that are perfect, such as maples. Both the large specimens, such as red maples and sugar maples, as well as dwarf varieties, such as Japanese maples, can make beautiful additions to gardens. I like these trees because they give you something extra in the fall, beautiful color. Of course, I consider oaks mainstays. In fact, I plan my entire garden around a large oak that towers over my home. On my new property, where I'm planning a garden home, I have 7 of these massive trees. They're wonderful places to stop and just take in the shade, if not have a picnic under them. Other trees I use as ornamentals include Japanese magnolias, crab apples, weeping cherries, dogwoods, and redbuds. All make good choices for spring color across the country. In coastal areas, you'll find live oaks and palms. And in other states, you'll find spruce and pine. You know, we've got a diverse landscape across this beautiful country of ours. Graceful and beautiful, the bloom of the magnolia. And when it comes to learning about this flowering tree, I turn to my friend and plantsman Larry Lohman, who has a collection of over 50 different magnolia trees.
The magnolia family as a whole is extremely diverse, and there's just a multitude of uses. It's a very adaptable plant and could perform any number of useful purposes in the landscape. More often than not, these Asian magnolias, like the one behind me with the really elegant flowers, are used as centerpieces, just a solo specimen out there really shining by itself. And they're often planted in the open all by themselves in full sun. We blend them. The shrubby forms, like the star magnolias, I like to use as a mixture in a shrub border. The southern magnolia, the big green grandifloras, are usually used as solo specimens in the middle of a large space. So it just depends on what you want out of the plant. The flowers are very elegant if they're situated against a backdrop that's dark. These trees typically grow in a forest habitat and are used to having leaf mulch entirely covering their root system. Their roots typically seek the surface and oxygen and air and are very shallow, and so they need a lot of surface mulch to protect them to be at their best. The question of why I grow so many magnolias is like asking someone why they like redheads. I, for some reason, am just attracted to them. The flowers, the plant organism itself, even the roots smell good when you're transplanting them and messing with them. But there's just something about the flowers in the spring. I'm also very attracted to daffodils from my childhood on. And so things I think that bloom really early in the spring are the main reason I like them.
Now today's viewer mail is about those wires that you often see hanging on young trees, you know, from the top or middle part down to the ground. Mary Jane in Oklahoma writes, "Are these really necessary?" Well, Mary Jane, if that line from your state song really is true, when the wind goes sweeping down the plain, you bet. You see, this keeps the wind from blowing them back and forth. Constant movement keeps the roots from being established. If you tie them, make sure the wire is removed so it doesn't constrict the growth of the trunk, as you can see here. If you plant some trees this season, these few suggestions will go a long way toward them being more vigorous, healthy trees. Wow, now talking about all that tree planting has caused me to work up an appetite. But don't you go and grab a snack just yet. There's a great recipe coming up right after this.
What we're going to make today is a pan-seared Hawaiian blue nose sea bass on top of butternut squash, finished with a pomegranate creme fraiche. And how we're going to start this today, I'm going to start with the squash because it takes the longest. One thing you want to do with the squash, just to accentuate the flavor, bring out some little extra, add a touch of cinnamon. Be very careful with it because as the squash heats up, the oils will release. You don't want too much cinnamon flavor in there. You really just want an accent. And just a touch of cumin. And then season it with just a little bit of salt and pepper. Now onto the fish. What we're going to do here is I've got just a little bit of sea bass. Put a little bit of seasoning on top. You can go ahead and be a little bit generous with that because it is a thick piece of fish. One rule that I always keep in the kitchen is hot pan, cold oil. What I mean by that is you want to have a really hot pan on the stove, add your oil in right before you add your product. If you heat your pan up, with oil in it, that's when you get kitchen fires. And always put the fish in away from you. That way the oil doesn't splash right up back onto you. And if your fish is sticking, it means it's not ready to be flipped yet. And what we're going to do here, we're going to flip it over, and if you can see that nice golden brown color. And we're going to finish this off in the oven as well. We're going to make the creme fraiche, and this is what's going to top the dish and bring everything together. What I'm using here is a pomegranate concentrate. We're roughly going to add equal parts sour cream. You can actually use palm juice, which most people are familiar with, in your grocer. All right, this is the finished product, and I'm going to grab the fish out of the oven. It's important to let your fish rest too. You want to let it just sit out. You want to let it rest, and what that does, it helps the juices stay inside the fish. As it's sitting out, it's actually continuing to cook. Once the product is completely rested, have a nice, tender, flaky piece of fish. And then we're ready to plate. Closing the door with your foot is fun. You're right here, you're just going to take your tongs, put this in the center of the plate, grab the fish, right out. What I went ahead and did, I put my creme fraiche in a squeeze bottle for presentation's sake. Make it look really pretty like that, kind of like a little flower. Take the pomegranate seeds and garnish them right on the top. There you have it, a special that we serve here at Fresno.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I can't believe the time's already passed. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We talked about some interesting trees, as well as ways to accent those garden rooms with furnishings. And don't forget about that recipe. Remember, all the information in today's show can be found on my website. That's pallansmith.com. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
Follow P. Alan Smith through 4 seasons of Living in the Garden Home, the latest title in his best-selling series of books. Pre-order a copy at bookstores nationwide.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.